how are you all doing? Welcome to round 2 of Android development. This time it's going to be a little bit different because we're going to use Kotlin instead, which is considered the, you could say, the sexier option of making Android apps. Now, some of you may be familiar with Kotlin, some of you may not be. However, I'm going to talk you through some of the basics and hopefully get you started. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm Will. I'm the coordinator for Hack Quarantine. I'm also pretty involved in the UK Hackathon scheme, and been involved with Hack the Midlands and a few other things. Got any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Discord or Twitter, and I'll happily answer any of your questions. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, what actually makes up an Android app? Now, this is a great question because it could be all sorts of things. I mean, you've got many different ways of making Android apps. So we've got the standard way of making them, which I discussed last week in the introduction to Android Java edition. So there's a hint. There's also different ways such as Flutter you can use, as well as React Native, which are kind of cross-platform solutions. Some of you last week heard about those. However, I won't touch about those really too much. The one thing it definitely isn't made up of is this friend. Now this is Swift, which is what you use for iOS development. We will not be having any of that over the next hour, so don't worry about that if you're not a fan of Swift. However, what Android apps are typically made up of is Java. So Java is used to write all the logic inside of your apps, whether this be how you process data or talk to different components of an Android device. All of this is done in Java normally. See the normal bit there? Normally. Now, your user interface is defined in XML. However, you can modify this in Java as well while the app is running. So you can have a preset template saying, I want this button to be here and this text to be here, and you're not planning for it to change or move. You just want it to be there. You can do all of that in XML really, really easily. Then you've got your friend Gradle, who comes along and helps build the app and turns it into an APK. Now, in my speaker notes, I have APK written as Android application package. Now, someone last week corrected me and told me that is not the case. I still don't know what it is. Please feel free to correct me in chat again. Round 2, always mistakes. However, the APK is an executable that runs on Android, so it has all the UI and logic all tied together in one complete package. Now, think of it like an exe executable on Windows or a .dmg on macOS, for example. Very similar idea, but on Android. Now, this workshop has a nice twist because if anyone's written Java before, you've not enjoyed it or you've not written anything good. They're the two key things, right? You've written a nice language like Kotlin, or you've never written a nice language and you think it's nice. Now, that's where this new kid on the block turns up. Kotlin has decided to kick Java out of its little throne and become the new default language for Android development. And I am still getting to learn Kotlin. I'm still quite new to it compared to my experience with Java. However, it's got a lot of nice features and generally kind of speeds up the development process. And as Google puts it, makes it a more enjoyable experience. So Google understands that writing Java may not be preferable to some people. Now, one of the cool things about Android is you can actually write Kotlin and Java together because Kotlin is also ran inside of the JVM. Someone just told me Java should be banned. It should be. It's a truly poor language. Now, so Java is compiled into bytecode and then ran inside of the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine. Kotlin is also run inside of the Java Virtual Machine, which means you can do a really cursed thing and run Java and Kotlin in the same app because they both effectively compile into the same thing. So you can have an app which has some Kotlin, some Java, some Kotlin there, some Java there, and it works actually quite well together, surprisingly. However, this is a big no-no to Java today, so don't worry if you thought about ever getting any Java today. So, Android apps have a lot going on. This can be quite intimidating, but don't let this put you off. We're going to go through each layer of folders and break it down, starting at the top of the project. So, if you look right to the right-hand side, we've got all of our code in these Kotlin files, .kt. We've also got our XML, which is the UI that I discussed earlier, inside of the resources folder. Now, disclaimer, I am guaranteed to call the res folder the resolution folder because, I mean, as a gamer, everyone refers to resolution as res. And I mean, I've done the same thing here. However, apparently in programming, they call it resources. Now, I nearly said it again there, so call me out if I get it wrong. I'm guaranteed to get it wrong at least once. Right? Maybe we'll have a little tally at the end. So right at the top, we'll start right at the top. The two most notable things you'll see are the build.gradle file and the app directory. The build.gradle is used to specify how Gradle is going to build your app. For the most part, you can leave this alone. The one that's more interesting to us is what is inside the app directory. So let's hop into there, and you'll see. Hang on a second. Is that another build.gradle file? Why is there two of these? Like, surely one is enough, especially if you're only making one app. Well, I mean, that would make a lot of sense, and to be fair, you don't really need two. But when you create an app in Android Studio, it generates two. Doesn't really matter because you don't need to touch one. So for a basic app, it's not necessary, but it can come in handy if you decide to make an app for Wear OS or for, specifically for tablets or something for maybe Android Auto and vice versa. So you can have different modules. So at the moment we've got the app module, but you could have a watch module or a tablet module, or you can have as many modules as you like. And then in each of those modules you can have a specific build.gradle file that effectively just says, for this certain version of it, I want to have these requirements. So the build.gradle is where you'd put like libraries that you might want to use. I once used an SVG library that meant I could display SVGs in the app. You might want to do that on a phone, but you might not want to do it on a watch, for example, because it's a smaller screen. So the top build.gradle is normally used for kind of broader requirements that everything's going to need, and then the one inside is the one used for kind of the nitty-gritty details. Now, the other thing we have here is the source folder. Now, this is where things start getting exciting. Inside of here, we have nothing. We have a main folder. So let's skip down one more. Now we have three interesting things. The first is our Android manifest and two directories, which is where our code and UI will sit. So inside of the Android manifest is where we describe all the essential information about your app to build tools, as well as the Android OS and Google Play. The manifest normally contains stuff looking a little bit like this that you can currently see. So you'll see that it has the app name, the icon, maybe a round icon, the theme, so it knows what's going on, and then activities. Now, some of you may know what an activity is because you tuned into last week's workshop. Hey, but if you haven't tuned into last week's workshop, that's absolutely fine because I'm going to go over the same stuff again. So you've got all the activities, which are effectively like your different screens in the app. You've got all of those specified, as well as different things in there. So it's quite important that this is correct. If it's not, your app just won't compile. So the other folder we have is the Java folder. Now, inside of here, you're going to find Kotlin. Now, that might seem a little counterintuitive. You thought we were getting Java out of this workshop. Now, there's only so much Java we can get rid of. Some things are the same in Kotlin. For example, the way that packages are defined are the same as they would be in Java. However, we're going to be writing Kotlin, so don't get too worried. But it does mean we can write Java if we want to. So you can see here we've got a bit of basic Kotlin here. We've got an onCreate inside of here. This is basically it's like, think of it like a constructor. It's the first method to run when you start an activity, a window in an app. So you can tell it to set up some stuff or, kind of initialize some stuff. And we've also got a try again method here, which calls the method finish, which just closes the activity and goes back to where it was. So if you only have one activity, it will close the app. So it could be quite handy if you wanted to log out of a banking app and you wanted to close the app afterwards. And we've got our resources folder. Now, I haven't said resolution yet, but it's a matter of time. So this is where we define things like the app icon, UI, menu, strings that we might use in the app, colors, styles, dimensions, anything that might help us kind of make the app look pretty or, be displayed to the user will all be done inside of here. So we'll jump straight into the drawable folder. Now you'll find your icons in here. This could include app icons, or it can include things such as, all of this is stored inside the drawable directory. Android Studio lets you add material design icons into your apps quite easily, so you can just add your own, or you could just add your own SVGs and PNGs. It's completely up to you. Now, I will show you a little bit later how you can import your own icons, so you haven't got to go onto the material.io website, highly recommended, and download them there and then input them into your app. You can just do it all straight into Android Studio. Next, we have our layouts folder. Now, inside of here, we have all of the UI defined. So we have in this example, we have a view. The what a view will show is basically just a single component of the UI. This is all written inside of XML, but we'll discuss a little bit more how you write that later. Next, we have our menu directory, which contains, well, have a guess, menus. This app doesn't actually have any menus, but if it did, we'd put them in here. These can also be written in XML. So here's an example of a menu that I'm writing in another app. As you can see here, I have different items. So I've got the top one, which is a countdown, next one that's time, and the last one's about. And this would be for a little hamburger menu at the top side of the app. If you think about it, there's like 3 little dots in the corner. If you press that, you'll be able to press the different options. And lastly, we have the values folder, which contains all of the other details of our app. This includes the colors.xml, where we defined all of the colors in hexadecimal, the dimensions, such as padding, margin, font size, all of the above. We have strings. Inside of here, we can put all the strings so they're easily referenceable. This means that we can also update all of the strings in one place. So let's say you're referring to a certain name for something. Rather than having to write hard code that in 5 different places, we just put it in here, and it means we can, if we have to update our app at any point, we can easily change that really, really easily. And lastly, we have the styles, which is where we can change the theme of our app, including stuff like dark themes if we decide to. Now we've gone through the entire project structure, it's time to talk about different components and what actually makes up an Android app. Let's start with components. So there are 4 different types of components, which are essential building blocks for our app. They are all entries into your app from both a user and system perspective. So first of all, we have activities. This is an entry point for interacting with the user. It's a single screen with UI, such as this. Now, this could display a list of emails, composing a new email, or reading an email. Now, in the example you can see here, this is an app I made called YoSushi Price Calculator. Now, if any of you have been to YoSushi in the UK, I don't know if it's a global chain, I don't think so, you'll know that the price, basically, they have a little conveyor belt that goes around, and each plate has a color, and the color represents a price. Now, it can get quite easily to spend too much money, because you can just pick up more plates and not even think about it. And I wanted to make an app to make sure I didn't go bankrupt, basically. So the idea is that I put a bunch of icons on the screen, and meant that you could easily just add how many different color plates you got, and it would come up with a price. However, prices are currently wrong. People don't like that. However, due to COVID-19 kind of closing all restaurants, I've got a chance to update my app. Hey, if I get around to it, that is. So anyway, next on the list is services. This is an entry point for keeping your app running in the background. So this could be for music playback, such as the example below, or downloading a file, for example. They don't necessarily need to have a UI. Third of all, we have our broadcast receivers. This enables the system to deliver events. These events can be used for communication between the app and the operating system. An example of this could be when a phone goes into or out of airplane mode. And lastly, we have the content providers. Now, I won't really touch on these at the moment. These are kind of the odd one out when it comes to components. These ones handle the data and database management inside of your app. So this could be how you could interact with an SQL-like database on the web, for example. So all of the components sound great, right? But how do we actually use them? 3 of the 4 of these components use intents, apart from the content provider, which is why we're not going to really touch on it too much today. However, we had a wonderful fella do a workshop for us on data inside of Android, so I'd highly recommend to check that out on our YouTube channel. Now, an intent is an asynchronous message. It binds individual components at runtime. It makes life a little bit easier because you've got all these different things you want to do, and you can just do it for intent. So an intent looks a little bit like this. This is how you would create an object in your code which defines the action to perform. In this example, the intent object is going to start the party activity. So I can then hand this over to a method called start activity, and I hand it the intent. And once I've handed it the intent, it will open this new activity for us. So now we know what works under the hood. How can we actually display stuff to the user? We need to write a user interface, but how does that actually work? So the user interface is written in XML. Now this can look a little daunting at first, but Android Studio lets you visualize what you're looking at. So after a bit of practice, XML comes quite naturally as it's pretty human readable. There's quite a lot going on there, and it can seem a little intimidating, but don't worry, you'll get the hang of it. Android Studio also gives you the ability to drag and drop views onto your screen. So this definitely helps you get started, but can feel quite limiting over time or a little bit confusing because you want to just find that one thing you're looking for in the properties section when you could just add it in XML. So that's well and good and all, but what actually makes a UI? What is a UI made up of? So the UI is made up of both views and view groups. Views are a single component on the UI. These can be text, labels, buttons, images. The idea is the view group, it can also be referred to as a layout, contains the views and basically tells them how they should be displayed on the screen. So in this example below, I've got a view group which has a view group inside of it, so you can have a layout inside of a layout, and you can kind of then distribute your views like that. So here's an example of actual views and how they might be grouped. We've got a linear layout with two text views. Now, a linear layout is effectively everything's in a linear order, either vertically or horizontally. We've also got a constraint layout where we can tell things to be constrained by other views on the screen, so they will never overlap with different size screens, for example. Now, we've also got a text view which displays text, an edit text which is like a text box you can type in, a button, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, a checkbox, I also think that's pretty self-explanatory, and a spinner, which is effectively like a drop-down menu. Now, here is an example of a linear layout in a vertical orientation. It contains 4 different views, which could be anything from a text view to buttons. Now, let's say we want to display 2 things next to each other. We can do that with another linear layout inside of it. So we've got our vertical one, which is kind of the bigger parent, you could say, and then we've got this other linear layout inside with 2 views next to each other in a horizontal format. And that makes life just a little bit easier. So there's an example of how to do UI. And I'm now going to jump straight into Android Studio to give you a live demo. So we're going to be making a guessing game from scratch in Kotlin. Now, disclaimer, I am no Kotlin expert. I will probably get something wrong. However, if there's anything that you spot that I made wrong or something, or it's not going to work, do call me out. However, I don't recommend that you follow along with the workshop on the live stream. This will be uploaded to YouTube afterwards, so you'll be able to follow along at your own pace. All the code I am writing today, as well as the slides, can be found online at workshops.will-russell.com. So don't worry if you don't get everything down. You can follow along at your own pace. Also, I will be writing the code much quicker than you can write the code because I'm not really writing the code. It's all magic. So don't worry if you can't follow along. Now, if I press that button and then... Now, this is where things get a little bit fruity because I've got to try and work out how to get this to work. Here we go. Okay, so now let's head back to our Android screen. So you should be able to see my desktop, hopefully. Thumbs up if you can, thumbs down if you can't. You should be able to see the Android Studio screen now. I'm just waiting for the live stream to catch up. Hopefully the live stream catches up. If the live stream doesn't catch up, we'll find out. Hey, you can see it. Wonderful. Thanks, chat, for not letting me know. Not salty at all. So, inside of Android Studio, if you download Android Studio over on Google's website, just search for Android Studio. However, if you go to workshops.will-russell.com, which only got created about 10 hours ago, all of the information can be found on that website. So don't worry if you miss out. Now we're going to create a new Android Studio project. I'm going to create an empty activity, so there's going to be nothing on the screen, and then it's going to ask me what I should call my app. So I'm going to call it Hack Quarantine. You can hear my laptop in the background. That's because Android Studio, if anyone's seen the memes, Android Studio is renowned for just making your laptop take off. Actually, I think it's time to find ourselves. We'll find the Android Studio memes very quickly, right? everyone deserves to see a good Android Studio meme. Now this is a absolute classic that everyone's gonna love. Here we go. So you'll see here in this example, we've got we are going to freeze to death if we don't do something. We only have one option left. Run Android Studio. So yeah, basically, wonderful meme, including the the Walmart PC as well. Just top quality. Yes. So that is that for you. Now, let's hop back into Android Studio. What we have here is our package name. I'm just going to call it com.willrussell.hackquarantine. And if I go to save location, I can go to project. I'm just going to create a new folder in here. I'm going to call it HQ Kotlin because I made the mistake of not making a folder last time. There we go. Here we've got minimum API level. What we can do there is we can decide how kind of far back we want our app to go. We can decide for it to be Android 10 all the way down to Android 5. Now this just means it will support more people. As it says here, it reckons 94% of devices will actually support this, which is quite nice. If you go to Android 10, it's like no one's going to support this. Now this has changed since the last workshop. It used to say less than 1%. Now that's or maybe it was oops. We're going to go with Lollipop because that was when material design was introduced. It means you can do all the fancy things you want to do there. We also want to select Kotlin, so it means we've got access to the wonderful language and not Java. Now, if I click Finish, Android Studio is going to open. And now Gradle is going to start building our project. Now, this can take a little bit of time. Now, it's patient. While that's happening, if you go over to the top left-hand corner, you'll see it says Android. Now, what we can do here is we can press Project, and now it's going to show us exactly what it looks like inside of GitHub or inside of our, file directory. I prefer doing this because it just means I can find things a little bit easier because they're in the same places where I would expect them in other places, but your mileage may vary. Now, Gradle is basically just indexing everything inside of the code, so when I do stuff, it auto completes really nicely. So I can just expand all of this out while it's doing that, and you'll see inside of main, I've got my Java, my res, and my main Android manifest. Now, if we go all the way down in, we'll see our main activity. We'll open that up as the first thing to look at. Now, pinch to zoom's not working. Terribly sorry. You won't be getting pinch to zoom today, apparently. Okay, so inside of here, we've got ourselves a onCreate method. Now, what this does is it effectively just starts the app, and we can define anything we want in here. I think what we'll first start off with is we'll create some variables. So if we're going to make a guessing game app, we need three things, really. We need a box that people can enter their number into. We need a button that they can press to say, yep, that is correct. And we need a variable to store this random number. So if I just start off, we'll have three private variables, random number, number view, and input edit text. Now, one of the issues that we might fall into is the fact that we haven't imported some of these libraries. So if you're on a Mac, if you press Option and Enter, it will give the option to import them. On Windows, I think it's Alt Shift Enter. However, you can easily Google these sort of things. Oh, there we go. I can zoom now. There we go. Gradle's finished building. So here I've got my three variables. This means that with text view, I'll be able to change the text displayed to the user with Kotlin, and edit text will allow me to get the input we want. So now we've done that, if we go into this, and we can now put in our onCreate, we can basically tell it to find the element on the UI. So we can say the number view is actually this thing, and the edit text is actually this thing. However, we haven't actually defined our UI yet, so it is going to be a little bit unhappy for the time being. We'll come back to that in a minute. And then we've also got our generate number method. Now, we haven't got one of those. So if we're going to make a generate number method, we'd need to use the random library from Kotlin to generate a random number between 1 and 10, let's say, and then assign that to a variable. So if I just generate the number, here we go. I've got the random library from Kotlin. What it's going to do is it's going to get the next integer until the number 10. So that's very easy for us to do. And that will set this up here as well. Perfect. Now we've done that, I reckon let's hop over to our UI and we can get started with just building a basic UI that has these different elements on. So inside of our app, we'll see this sort of screen. It just says hello world, nothing particularly exciting. Now I don't want that, so we're just going to get rid of that text view. And now we're going to use we're already inside of a constraint layout. So this basically means that everything's going to be constrained by other things on the screen. Now, first thing we want is a text view that basically just says what is happening. Apart from, it's missing a few things. What it's missing is it doesn't know what to display because we haven't defined that yet, how big to be, and what it's constrained by. So before we get too carried away, let's hop over to the values folder we talked about earlier and go to our strings. Now, apparently our app is called Hack Quarantine. I don't think so. If I can put in strings. So here I've got my different strings, including the app name, the different labels we want to use, and the labels for the buttons, which will come in handy a little bit later. We've also got the colors I discussed earlier. However, let's change that up a little bit. Let's make the app orange. That kind of matches the yellowish theme. How is a hello world going to hack anything? Now, a hello world is not going to hack anything. Don't worry, we're not going to do hello world. It's just boilerplate code. So the resources folder here. So the resources here, we've got our color primary, color dark. So if you've ever used an Android app before, you'll know that you've got like a bar at the top and then the status bar, and they're like two different shades of color, right? Two different tones. So in here, you can do color primary for your default one, and then color dark as a slightly darker tint of that, which you can work out using material.io. There's some really good resources on there that will be found on workshops.will-russell.com later. So now we've done that, we need to do one, and then here's our resources. Now we're not going to do any of this because we don't care, but there is a just tells us what colors we're going to use. Oh yeah, and the accent one is normally used for buttons, as we'll see a little bit later. Now, if I create a new file, we'll go for a value resources file and we'll call it dim.xml. Now, inside of here, what I can do is add in some dimensions. So in this example, we've got the input margin and the title size, so that we get the text the right size and things aren't touching the edge of the screen. All quite simple and straightforward. Now, back to our main activity. Here we go. We've got the UI. Now it says guess a number, but it still doesn't know what it's constrained by because, again, as I've discussed, excuse me, as I've discussed, we need to constrain it by things, but I haven't put all the UI elements in yet. So we'll put the edit text in now. So now we have an edit text. So we've got this little box that we can put stuff in. Quite simple. And we've also got a button so we can guess. So now we have our three things on the screen as expected. The label that will say guess a number, and we'll change this to say you're wrong. You didn't guess the number correctly, or well, hey, you guessed correctly. Win, win, win. And then a button that they can press to say, cool, I'm ready to guess. Back over to the Kotlin. One thing that we didn't see is right at the bottom here, we've got a squiggly line. It's like when I press the button on click, run the method called check guess inside of this activity. Now, we don't have one. If I quickly, let's just close some of these files, just make it easier. Wasn't the plan. Well, hey, if we go back to Kotlin, the main activity, we've only got two methods here. We've got a generate number and a onCreate. Now, this isn't ideal because we can't need an onClick as well. So if I actually I can create that. Hang on. I did something really clever last night, but I don't think here you go. So I can check my guess like so. I can import the view like so. So therefore, it basically takes a view as an argument, so it knows what element actually called it. So if you've got several buttons, you can, if you've got several elements, it can kind of go, oh, if it's this button, do this. We don't really care though, so we're actually just not going to use this, but we need to have it anyway. So that's why it says it's never used. Now inside of here, we've got our input. We get it from the edit text, which is why we have to define it up here so we can access it. And we just say get the text and turn it into a string. And then if they didn't enter anything, don't do anything. If they did, turn that value into an integer. So we use integer.parseInt to turn that into a nice integer. Now that is all great and nice, but we have no way of checking that. So what we're going to do now, see if I actually did this correctly, is we have this. So what we have next is if the guessed value, which is this one here, and the random number, this variable up here, which we default set to 0, if they're equal to each other, then I want it to start an activity, an intent, and say, run the party activity. Now, the real question is, what is the party activity? You find out later. I'm not going to discuss that just yet. However, we do need to import the intent object, the library. Ooh, I pressed the wrong key. There we go. Import. Bang. Done. Easy. Also, semicolon. Oof. You can tell I wrote this in Java. It shows. Wonderful. Okay, and then right at the bottom here, if it's not correct, it will then just get the number view dot text, and it will say resources dot get string, and it will say give it the incorrect label. Now we can see that a little bit later. Okay, so what we have here is a view. We have it, so basically we've got, ooh, where's my preview? Here we go. We've got a screen that has a text box, a button, and a label. If we put something into the text box, it will we'll check to see if it gets the same as the random number we generate, and if it is, we'll display a new activity. If it's not, we will tell them they're wrong. Now, let me close this massive sidebar. One thing I didn't touch upon is in the edit text, we only want to input numbers, because if we don't, this bit of code here is going to poop itself. It's going to be like, I can't turn that string into an integer. They put a $sign in. So in really nicely, because otherwise I have to do a lot of different like validation. I can just tell the edit text just to not accept anything that's not a number, which makes my life really easy because I can just guarantee the input's going to be a number then. Really nice little touch there. Do quite like that. So I think next on the list is to make our party activity, I reckon. So if we go to new and we go to, so we can make a new Kotlin class and do it from scratch, but why would we do that when we can just get Android Studio to do it all for us? Now that is a power move. So inside of here, at the bottom here, we've got activities. Now we can add a new empty activity. I'm going to call this one a party activity. Now, this is going to be written in Kotlin. It's going to have a layout called activity underscore party, and that's the package. It's not going to be the launcher activity, which means it's going to be the first thing to open. There is no need for this. And then I can press finish, and it's going to build that. Gradle is going to poop itself while it creates a new one, generates all the new stuff it needs to do, and then ta-da! We have our new class. Now, the class isn't going to do anything really, because all we want it to do is display a message, really. I mean, we can display other things if we have time, but at the moment we just want to display a message. So we'll just add a text view. Really nice text view here. All it's going to say is, you guessed correctly. Woo! Nothing particularly exciting, but hey ho, it's a nice little congratulations. And we also want to add a button so that, so actually let's just run that as it is. We'll go on to that in a minute. So there we go, now the party activity works. If I press run, now I'm going to use an Android emulator because that means I can see it on my phone quite easily. This is the app I had open last night. It's going to just rebuild it, don't worry. So what we can do, if I just grab my phone from behind me, is we can actually plug a phone in with a cable straight into your laptop, and you can actually just run it on the phone. You will have to enable things like USB debugging, which Android has some beautiful, really well-written guides that you can follow. Any problems, just hit me up on Discord and I'll happily give you a hand. However, the emulator does help with development if your laptop can handle it, because it means that you haven't got to constantly keep picking up your phone. It means I can easily switch between the two of these very, very easily without having to faff too much. So it says guess a number. Now, we've done something quite silly here. I'm going to cheat. Shh. Apart from I can't remember how to do print statements in Kotlin. So we're not going to cheat because I can't remember how to cheat. Hey. So anyone who knows how to do print statements in Kotlin, do let me know. I'm not going to Google it. That'd be cheating. So what we're going to do is press 1 and we're going to click submit. It says we guessed incorrectly. Now we can speed this up a little bit. Oh, no. 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 Hey, we guessed correctly. So what it's done is it's opened a new screen and we can see what's going on here. But what if we wanted to guess random numbers forever and ever? Continuously until we die. Now that would be quite dark. Now let's not do that. But let's guess a few more random numbers. Now the issue is I have no way of generating a new number. It generates a number when the app opens, and that's it. If I go back, it's going to be the same number because this activity wasn't created. It was just already there. See, same number. That's no fun. So let's go back to Android Studio and we'll hop back into our party activity. Now, what we can do is create a method called try again. Did I not make this? I mean, I do know how to write it if I need to. There we go, finish. So all it is just a function called try again, takes a view again, and it finishes the activity for us. I'll just zoom in so you guys can see that a little bit easier. All it's going to, so this is a default Android method. If you just call finish, it will just close the activity. So if you've only got one activity, that will close your app. If you just got like a little pop-up one and let's say, for example, you've asked someone to, add a new contact and they press the done button, then you just finish the activity and it would just disappear. Quite a nice, very simple thing to do. It's just quite straightforward. I quite like it because it's easy. It's not like a lot of faff that some things have in programming. Looking at you, JavaScript, and Java, to be fair. Anyway, back to party activity. So we have a method called try again, but we haven't got a button. A bit hard to guess again if you can't actually ask it to guess again. So what we're going to do is we're going to try Now, this is where things get fruity. There we go. Try again button. So we have this nice button down here that's going to call the try again method. And what? It does exist. Oh, it doesn't know what view is. If in doubt, import all your stuff. There we go. Now it's going to be happy. It was like, I need to give it a view. There we go. It's happy now. So what's happened here is we've given it, we've got our button. We've told, we've also given these things IDs. So the IDs basically just identify us. So here we can say, be constrained by this thing. Pretty straightforward. We give it the string try again, which we can find over here. Try again. And it means that when we just ask you to do on the try again, give it another go. So if it tries, however, there is one key thing I've realized we've missed. And I want to see if anyone can work it out. So if I actually run the app, just kill it, start again. Emulator's just looking bored. All of the apps I've tried to make recently. Let's just hide that. Now, let's do some guessing, shall we? Submit. Nah, that's not okay. I'm actually just using my keyboard to type. You don't know. Yeah, don't worry. It's gonna work. Oh, it doesn't know. Now, I could just make the range shorter, right? Hey, I guess correctly. Now, if I press the try again button, I can guarantee you that number 6 is going to be the same number. Why? Well, we never actually asked it to generate a new number, did we? So, there's no reason why we'd have a new number. So, anyway, what we need to do is, now this is finished, you'll notice earlier I did a thing that you probably didn't notice, but I did it on purpose. We've got start activity for result. And normally you just give it start activity and you don't give it a number, right? You just give it the intent and that will start the activity. If I run that again, that will also just work. Quite nice, quite clean. And for most things you're doing, this will be fine. So here's our app. Now let's guess the numbers again. Guessed incorrectly. Let's try 7. 7's a lucky number, right? Evidently not. It won't work with 78. I mean, we can guess 78, but it's definitely not 78. 6. No, apparently it does not like that. Okay, I'm loving life. Hey, we guessed correctly. Now, if I press try, you see, it just started the activity exactly the same way before. Now, what we liked about this before, right, the for result, is it basically gives the activity this number 1. And then when it closes, we can listen for that number. So if it closes, we can tell that it's got back to the same place it started, is a way of thinking about it. So if I can override this method called onActivityResult, which has a request code, a result code, and the intent itself, data. Now, you just call the parent of this, doesn't really matter. But the key thing we're interested in here is if the request code equals 1, generate another number. So what it's going to do is it's going to hand over the request code 1 to this. When we call finish, it's going to call this method, and it's going to be like, is it 1? Is it 1? If it's 1, then yeah, sure, I'll generate another number. No problem. No problemo. So what we'll do is we'll build Gradle again. Gradle is the world's fastest, as we all know, world's fastest build tool. It's built. So if I press 1, should we see if it's 1? No. Wishful thinking, really. Not quite. Oh, there we go. You guessed correctly. Now, if I go back and guess 8 again, it's not 8 because it's generated as a new number. Now, if I try 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, there we go. It's 3 now. So now it's continuously generating new random numbers every time we start again, which is quite neat. However, we can make this app even nicer than that. You may have thought, that was pretty nice already. I mean, I can guess another number on another. You know, when you're sat on the toilet, bored out of your mind, looking for something to do, you can just sit there on your phone, guessing random numbers. Now that is a power move. There you go. For all of those bored at home looking for something to do. Robbie from Durhack, I know you're not watching right now, but if you were, and I know you like keeping something occupied to do, there you go. You can guess random numbers now continuously, no problem. So we want to make this a little bit easier, right? If I click try again, as you saw, it's a little bit tedious. I've got to press 1 and then get rid of the keyboard and then press submit. Like, you know how some apps, right? If I press the little tick on the keyboard, it's going to actually just submit the form or go to the next option or whatever. We can actually write that quite easily in Kotlin. So if I hop up to the top again, in our onCreate, we want to create a listener. Now, this listener is going to... Ooh, there we go. It's a bit too big. What this listener is going to do is listen for the keyboard and listen to see if we press the enter key or the done key. Now, some keyboards might have different buttons, but we're going to listen for both. So the done key would be that little one in the corner, but you might end up having, for example, if I press the enter key on my keyboard, it will also work on my laptop. And then if it does that, all I want it to do is then run the check guess number. We give it the view because we don't even care about the view, but it means that we can call the same thing twice. We give it the view v, and then it will run it again, and it will get the text, and it just makes things a little bit easier. Now, if we just run that again, we'll wait. Android Studio be like, there we go. So now, if I press 1 and press the tick, it guessed correctly without us having to do 2 things. Just a nice little thing, right? You'd be surprised at how many little things you can actually do like that. Just little things. They can be a bit complicated. However, Stack Overflow is your best friend for these things. And that is how I found out how to do this trick. I was like, how can I get the enter key to press enter like you see on some apps? Quite nice. Quite like that. Now, that is nearly it. What I am going to do is quickly brush upon a little bit of the UI and answer any questions you guys have in the chat. So what we have going on here is inside of the UI, something I didn't brush upon earlier, is we have our ID, really. So what the ID is it just gives us something that we can refer to in Kotlin, such as here, id.numberView. It also gives us something that we can use to refer with other views. So we can say, I want you to be constrained by the top. I want the top of this view to be constrained by the bottom of this one. So it basically means that it's going to be constrained by the bottom of this. Quite neat. Text size here, pretty straightforward. And the color, we've just had it to be black. The string is one of the ones from our string file. And we've also got the layout width and the layout height. Now, what that basically means is how big do we want it? I've said be as big as the actual text. If I change the text size, so if I just remove this bit of code and give it 10 dp, it's going to make it really small. If I make it 100 dp, it's going to make it really big. Ooh, God, I broke it. Shit, no. Okay, it's fine. There you go. Easy, no problems. Then here I've said to match the parent. So basically it says it's going to be as wide as the actual screen itself. So if you're on a tablet, it's going to be really wide. So actually I can change this here. If I press this and press Pixel C, really wide. If I press on a Nexus 6, there you go. It means I like using a Pixel. Pixel 3 XL is actually the phone I'm using to demo this. I mean, it's not actually, it's a Pixel 3, but that's definitely a notch if you asked me. Just saying. Yeah, the emulator can be a little buggy. For example, if you want to do things with audio, it doesn't always work. If you want to do things with like GPS and all that, it doesn't always work. So if you're using device device sensors, I'd recommend using an actual phone. And then here we've got constrained by parents. It just means that this is going to be constrained by the size of the screen. Quite straightforward. And yeah, and we'll quickly go into the manifest. So in the manifest, we have our main activity and our party activity all defined in here quite nicely. And then it just says this is going to be the main activity. Now, I think that is all for today in today's Android workshop. If you have any questions, do feel free to let me know. I'll be more than happy to help out. Be more than happy to help out and give anyone a hand if they need it. Now, I hope to see some of you in the Discord server working on your different projects. Any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'd be more than happy to give you a hand. But that is all from me today, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow at my introduction to Git and GitHub workshop, or my how to build a Discord bot that's going to scrape memes from Reddit and post them in a Discord channel, such as r/cats or r/dankmemes. Completely up to you. Come chat to me on Twitter or Discord, and I'll hopefully see you all soon.